Captain Minapark felt the cold metal of the strange crystal device against her sweaty palms. Her ship was falling apart around her, piece by piece. Every blast from the Veltar warships sent violent shakes through the hull, making her teeth rattle and her heart pound faster. The bridge was chaos. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and the lights flickered on and off like a broken flashlight. Red warning alarms screamed so loud she could barely think straight. Through the main viewing screen, she could see the massive Veltar fleet, surrounding them like hungry wolves circling their prey. Captain Hulbreach on Deck 7, Lieutenant Jae-wook, Kim shouted over the noise, his voice cracking with stress. Sweat dripped down his face as he frantically worked his communication controls. We're losing atmosphere fast. Mina looked around at her crew. These weren't professional soldiers or trained fighters. They were just ordinary people who had lost everything. Families who had watched their worlds burn. Children who had seen their parents die. Old people who had lived through peace their whole lives until the Veltar came. Her ship. The Wandering Hope was packed with refugees from 47 different planets. 47 worlds that no longer existed because the Veltar had consumed them all. Some refugees were sleeping in the cargo holds. Others were crowded into hallways. They had given up their comfortable lives to flee across the galaxy, hoping to find somewhere safe. But safety was running out fast. Captain, we have. Maybe 10 minutes before total system failure, Engineer Sujin Lee called out from her station. Her hands moved quickly across the repair controls, but Mina could see it was hopeless. There were too many problems, and not enough time to fix them all. The Veltar weren't just destroying their ship. They were playing with them, like a cat, playing with a mouse before killing it. The enemy could have blown them up in seconds, but they wanted to capture everyone alive. The Veltar liked to keep their victims conscious when they absorbed their life energy. It made the process more efficient. They claimed Min-Ah had heard the stories from other refugees. How the Veltar would drain entire populations slowly, keeping them alive but weak for months. How they would force families to watch each other fade away. How they would save the children for last, because young energy tasted better to them. She looked down at the crystal device in her hands. It was beautiful in a strange way, with colors that seemed to shift and change when she moved it. The surface was smooth and warm, almost like it was alive. They had found it in the ruins of Earth's last city, buried under tons of metal and concrete, according to every history book in the galaxy. Humans had been extinct for 300 years. Their home planet had been destroyed in some kind of massive explosion. No one knew exactly what had happened, but most people believed it was a terrible accident with their own technology. Min-Ah had never met a human, but she had heard stories about them. They were supposed to be clever, but reckless. Brave, but stupid. They had a reputation for doing impossible things, but also for getting themselves killed in the process. The crystal device had been found with some old human writing that roughly translated to emergency communicator. Might have been a toy, for all she knew, but it was the only thing that looked like it might still work in the entire ruined city. Captain, Jae-wook yelled. Veltar boarding pods are attaching to our hull. They're getting ready to cut through. Mina could hear the sound of metal cutting through metal. The Veltar soldiers were using their plasma torches to burn through the airlock doors. In a few minutes, they would be inside the ship, and then it would all be over. She thought about the refugees sleeping in the cargo holds, mothers holding their babies, fathers trying to stay strong for their families, elderly people who had lived full lives and deserved to die in peace, not screaming in terror. The crystal device grew warmer in her hands. Maybe it was broken. Maybe it was just a pretty rock. Maybe the humans really were all dead and gone forever. But what choice did she have? If there are any humans left out there, she whispered to the device, her voice barely audible over the alarms and explosions. We need help. We need you now. She pressed what looked like an activation button on the side of the crystal. Device suddenly blazed with light, so bright that everyone on the bridge had to close their eyes. Energy pulsed through the crystal like a heartbeat, and then it shot out into space faster than light itself. The transmission raced through the darkness between stars, carrying Mina's desperate message to whoever might be listening. She didn't know if anyone would hear it. She didn't know if anyone would care, but she had done everything she could. The sound of cutting metal grew louder. The Veltar were almost through the airlock doors. Na drew her small pistol and looked at her crew. They all drew their weapons too, even though they knew it was useless against Veltar battle armor. "Well," she said with a sad smile, "at least we tried." The crystal device in Minna's hands suddenly went completely silent. The bright light faded away, leaving only a gentle blue glow. For a moment, she thought it had broken or died. The sound of Veltar soldiers cutting through their airlock doors continued, getting louder and more urgent. Then something impossible happened. The stars outside their viewing screen began to bend and twist, like someone was stirring the universe with a giant spoon. Space itself looked like it was folding in half, creating ripples that hurt to look at directly. The whole bridge crew stared in shock as reality seemed to tear apart right in front of their eyes. "What in the name of the ancient gods is happening?" whispered Engineer Sujin Lee, her voice filled with wonder and terror. Massive shapes began appearing out of nowhere. They weren't ships in any sense that Minna understood. These were structures so enormous that they made the largest Veltar dreadnoughts look like tiny toys. They were geometric and angular, with surfaces that seemed to shift between different colors and textures. Some looked like giant pyramids, others like massive cylinders, and still others had shapes that didn't have names. The closest structure was icily the size of a small moon. Its surface was covered in millions of tiny lights that twinkled like stars. Minna could see what looked like cities built into the sides of the structure, with tall towers and bridges connecting different sections. It was beautiful and terrifying. At the same time, Captain Tactical Officer Haiyan Wu Nam said in a shaky voice, "My scanner just broke. I think it gave up trying to measure these things." More structures kept appearing, surrounding the entire Veltar fleet. Within seconds, the enemy armada that had seemed so powerful and overwhelming was completely dwarfed by these mysterious newcomers. The Veltar ships looked like ants next to elephants. Then came the voice. It was calm, friendly, and spoke perfect galactic standard, with an accent that Nina had never heard before.
Ow.
The voice came through every communication channel at once, filling the bridge with warm, casual tones. "This is Admiral Duhayan Choi of the Terran Nomad Fleet. We got your message. Sorry for the delay. We were in the middle of lunch." Minna's heart stopped. Terran meant human. The humans weren't extinct. They were right here, and they were massive. The voice continued, sounding like someone talking to a neighbor over a fence. "Hope we didn't interrupt anything important. We were having some really good soup, and you know how it is when you're enjoying a meal." Lieutenant Jae-wook Kim frantically worked his controls, trying to get readings on the new arrivals. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely press the buttons. "Captain, these energy readings are off the charts. Each one of those structures is generating more power than our entire home planet used in a year." The cutting sounds from the airlock had stopped completely. Minna could imagine the Veltar soldiers standing there with their plasma torches, staring out at the impossible sight surrounding them. "Now then," Admiral Choi's voice continued, still sounding cheerful and relaxed. "Veltar forces, you have 30 seconds to withdraw before we start treating this as a noise complaint. We take our quiet time very seriously." There was something almost funny about the way he said it, like he was asking rowdy teenagers to turn down their music instead of facing down a fleet of planet-killing warships. Haiyan Nam managed to get his scanner working again, and his face went pale. "Captain, these readings, each of those structures has the mass of a small planet, but they're not planets. They're artificial. Someone built these things." Minna looked at the massive structures surrounding them. If each one was as big as a planet, then the humans had essentially brought an entire solar system's worth of firepower to this fight. The Veltar fleet, which had seemed unstoppable just minutes ago, was completely outmatched. Also, Admiral Choi added, his tone becoming slightly more serious but still friendly, "We noticed you folks were picking on some refugees. It's not very nice. We generally don't approve of bullying, especially when it interrupts our meal times." The main viewing screen flickered and changed to show the Veltar fleet. Mina watched in amazement as the massive enemy warships began turning around. These were the same ships that had destroyed 47 worlds. It's the same ships that had chased refugees across the galaxy. The same ships that had been seconds away from boarding and capturing everyone on the Wandering Hope, and they were retreating. Without firing a single shot, the Veltar dreadnoughts, each one the size of a city, began moving away from the human structures as fast as their engines could carry them. They looked like scared children running away from adults who had caught them doing something wrong. "That's better," Admiral Choi said approvingly. "We appreciate your cooperation. Have a nice day, and try not to bother anyone else during their lunch break." Mina watched the Veltar fleet disappear into the distance, their ships jumping too. Faster than light travel, as soon as they were far enough away, the enemy armada that had seemed so powerful and terrifying was gone, scattered like leaves in the wind. The bridge was completely silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's engines. Everyone stared at the massive human structures that now surrounded them protectively. Captain Soo-Jin Lee said quietly, "I think we just witnessed the most polite military intervention in galactic history." Mina thought the show was over when the Veltar fleet started retreating. She was wrong. What happened next was unlike anything anyone had ever seen in the history of galactic warfare. The massive human structures didn't pursue the fleeing Veltar, ships with weapons blazing. Instead, they released clouds of tiny objects that sparkled like glitter in the starlight. At first, Mina thought they might be missiles or fighters, but as they got closer to the Veltar fleet, she realized they were something completely different. "Captain Hyunwoo," Nam said, squinting at his scanner readings. "Those aren't weapons, maintenance drones." Thousands upon thousands of small robotic drones swarmed toward the retreating Veltar ships. Each drone was about the size of a person with multiple arms ending in various tools. They moved with purpose and coordination. Like a perfectly organized work crew, the first group of drones reached the nearest Veltar destroyer and immediately began what could only be described as a thorough inspection. They flew around the ship, scanning every surface, checking every joint and seam. Their behavior was so professional and methodical that it looked like they were conducting a routine safety audit. "Attention Veltar vessel," came a cheerful, automated voice over the communication channels. "We are conducting a mandatory safety inspection of your spacecraft. Please remain calm and do not resist. This is for your own protection." The Velta crew, clearly confused by this unexpected development, tried to fire their weapons at the drones. But something strange happened. Their weapons wouldn't work. The drones had somehow disabled all the ship's offensive systems without anyone noticing. "Did they do that?" whispered Engineer Soo-Jin Lee, watching in fascination as more drones swarmed over additional Veltar ships. Communications specialist Yoon Ji-yoon was monitoring multiple channels at once, trying to understand what was happening. Her eyes grew. "Why does she listen to the drone communications? Captain, you need to hear this. The drones are filing safety violation reports." She patched the drone chatter through to the bridge speakers. The crew listened as dozens of polite robotic voices discussed their findings. "Safety violation noted. Weapon system coolant leaking onto deck plating. Removing dangerous components for proper disposal. Structural integrity compromised by poor maintenance. Removing unstable plasma conduits to prevent explosion. Fire suppression system inadequate for current weapon load. Reducing weapon capacity to safe levels." Amana stared in disbelief. Are they disarming the entire fleet by pretending to help?" "Looks that way," Yoon Ji-yoon replied, barely able to contain her amazement. "They're treating this like a routine safety inspection, but they're systematically removing every weapon, shield generator, and engine upgrade the Veltar have." The drones worked with incredible efficiency. They used precision tools to carefully extract weapon components, neatly organizing the removed parts in labeled containers. Every action was performed with the professionalism of experienced mechanics, complete with detailed documentation and proper disposal procedures. Meanwhile, something even more bizarre was happening around the Veltar flagship. Enormous construction. Vessels, each one the size of a small city, had positioned themselves around the massive enemy command ship. These vessels began rapidly assembling what looked like a complex structure around the flagship. "What are they building?" Tactical Officer Hyunwoo Nam asked, zooming in on the construction activity. The answer became clear within minutes. Humans were building what appeared to be a recreational facility, complete with viewing windows, walking paths, and what looked suspiciously like a gift shop. They were literally turning the space around the enemy flagship into a tourist attraction. "Ladies and gentlemen," came Admiral Choi's voice over the communication channels. "Welcome to the Veltar Fleet Observation Deck. Please mind the gap when boarding. And remember that flash photography is not permitted near the engine compartments." The Veltar Admiral, clearly panicking at this point, began transmitting frantic surrender offers. His messages flooded all communication channels with increasingly desperate pleas. "We surrender. We surrender unconditionally. Please accept our complete and total surrender, human fleet. We acknowledge your superior power. We submit to your authority. Please, we beg you, accept our surrender and spare our lives." But the responses he received were not what he expected. Instead of military commanders accepting his surrender, he got automated customer service messages. "Thank you for your interest in our conflict resolution services. Your call is important to us. Please hold while we connect you to the next available representative. Para Espagole Presiona das." For surrender processing, please remain on the line. Your estimated wait time is 47 minutes. Did you know that our customer satisfaction rating is 98%? While you wait, please enjoy this relaxing music. Then actual elevator music began playing over the communication channels. Min-ah realized she was witnessing something completely unprecedented in galactic history. This wasn't warfare as anyone understood it. This was warfare conducted like casual customer service, complete with hold music and safety inspections. The Veltar crews, trained for brutal combat and familiar with honorable surrender, had no idea how to respond to being treated like customers with a service complaint. Their entire military doctrine had been built around intimidation and overwhelming force.
Ow.
Nobody had ever prepared them for an enemy that treated their invasion attempt like a minor inconvenience that required proper paperwork and a service appointment. Captain Sujin Lee said quietly, "I think we just watched the humans turn an entire enemy fleet into a customer service call." The drones continued their work, systematically disarming every Veltar ship while filing detailed safety reports. The construction crews kept building their observation deck around the flagship, and somewhere in the human fleet, customer service representatives were probably having lunch while letting the Veltar. Admiral listened to hold music. It was the most polite military defeat in galactic history. The last of the Veltar ships disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind only empty containers filled with their confiscated weapons and a half-built tourist observation deck. Mina stood on her bridge, still trying to process what she had just witnessed. The most feared military force in the galaxy had been defeated not by superior firepower, but by what seemed like a combination of helpful maintenance work and customer service procedures. One of the massive human structures began moving closer to the Wandering Hope. As it approached, Mina could see that it wasn't just a geometric shape. It was covered in cities, parks, and what looked like residential areas. Millions of lights twinkled across its surface, and she could even make out what appeared to be lakes and forests. Built into the structured sides, a smaller ship detached from the massive structure and approached their vessel. It was sleek and elegant, but not threatening. It looked more like a luxury yacht than a military craft. The ship docked with the Wandering Hope with a gentle precision that spoke of advanced technology and skilled piloting. "Permission to come." Aboard came Admiral Choi's voice over the communication system, still maintaining that same friendly, casual tone. "Permission granted," Mina replied, her voice slightly shaky. She had no idea what to expect from humanity's first official representative in 3 centuries. The airlock doors opened, and Admiral Duhayan Choi stepped onto her bridge. Mina had imagined him as some kind of imposing military figure, maybe, wearing advanced armor or looking intimidating. Instead, he was surprisingly ordinary, looking a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a gentle smile, wearing what appeared to be a comfortable sweater that looked hand-knitted. "Thank you for having me," he said, bowing slightly in a gesture of respect. "I hope we didn't cause too much excitement. We try to keep our interventions as low-key as possible." "Low-key?" Mina thought to herself. They had just made an entire enemy fleet surrender, using maintenance drones and elevator music. Would anyone like some coffee? Admiral Choi continued, producing a thermal container from seemingly nowhere. It's a fresh batch from our morning roast. We take our coffee very seriously. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Here was the commander of the most powerful fleet they had ever seen, offering them hot beverages like he was visiting neighbors. I'd love some, Mina said, curiosity getting the better of her. Admiral Choi poured coffee into several cups he had apparently brought with him. The aroma that filled the bridge was incredible, rich, complex, and somehow comforting. Mina took a sip, and her eyes widened. It was the best coffee she'd ever tasted in her life. Better than anything she had tried on dozens of different worlds. Now then, Admiral Choi said, settling into a chair with his own cup. I suppose you have some questions about what just happened. Earth wasn't destroyed, he began, answering the most obvious question before anyone could ask it. We faked our own extinction. Turned out the galaxy was too noisy, so we decided to go mobile. Chief Science Officer Woojin Park, who had been quietly drinking his coffee, nearly choked on his drink. You faked the destruction of your entire planet? Oh yes, Admiral Choi said with a chuckle. Quite an elaborate production, actually. Took us about 50 years to plan properly. We had to make sure all the evidence looked convincing, create fake debris fields, the whole thing. Hollywood would have been proud. But why? Mina asked, still struggling to understand. Admiral Choi gestured toward the viewport where his massive city ships hung in space like benevolent giants. We realized early on that having a fixed homeworld was more trouble than it was worth. Every time there was a galactic conflict, someone wanted to threaten Earth. Every time there was a trade dispute, someone wanted to blockade our system. It was exhausting. He took another sip of coffee and continued. So we decided to try something different. We evacuated everyone, built these mobile cities, and then staged our own extinction. This gave us the freedom to move around the galaxy without everyone knowing where we were or what we were up to. Those structures, Woojin Park said, pointing out the viewport. They're entire worlds, aren't they? Mobile cities, actually, Admiral Choi corrected gently. Each one houses about 50 million people, along with all the infrastructure you'd need for a complete civilization. Farms, factories, schools, parks, entertainment districts, everything. We got tired of staying in one place. Plus, it's much easier to help people when you can literally move mountains. Engineer Sujin Lee leaned forward. How many of these cities do you have? Oh, about 3,000 or so, Admiral Choi said casually, as if he were talking about the weather. Some are specialized for different purposes. We have agricultural cities, manufacturing cities, research cities, even a few that are just for vacation and recreation. The bridge crew sat in stunned silence. 3,000 mobile cities, each housing 50 million people. That meant the human population was around 150 billion people, all living in structures that could move freely through space. We've been keeping an eye on things through our coffee shop network, Admiral Choi continued. Amazing what people tell you when you make a good cup of coffee. We have little shops on most inhabited worlds, staffed by volunteers who wanted to see the galaxy. They send us regular reports about what's happening in different sectors. Coffee. Shops. Lieutenant Jae-wook Kim asked, confused. Oh yes, we're quite proud of our coffee culture. It started as a way to stay connected with galactic civilization without revealing who we really were. But it turned out to be incredibly effective. Intelligence gathering. People love to chat with their baristas, especially when the coffee is really good. Mina thought about all the small coffee shops she had visited over the years. Quiet little places with friendly staff who always seemed interested in hearing about her travels. Places where the coffee was always surprisingly excellent, and the baristas always seemed to know exactly what was happening in local politics. You've been watching us this whole time, she said, not quite a question. Watching and helping when we could, Admiral Choi confirmed. We couldn't always intervene directly without blowing our cover, but we did what we could. Anonymous tips to authorities about corruption, mysterious equipment malfunctions for particularly nasty dictators, that sort of thing. He gestured toward the crystal device that still sat on Mina's command chair. That little communicator has been floating around the galaxy for about a century now. We made sure it would eventually end up in the hands of someone who would use it responsibly. We just didn't expect it to take quite this long." "You were testing us?" Mina asked. "Not testing, exactly. It's more like waiting for the right moment. We knew that eventually someone would need our help badly enough to try calling extinct humanity for assistance. We wanted to make sure that when we revealed ourselves, it would be for the right reasons." Admiral Choi stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the refugee ship and the massive human city ships beyond. Protecting refugees from bullies seemed like a pretty good reason to us. 3 months had passed since the Great Veltar surrender. That wasn't really a surrender at all. Mina Park sat in her new office aboard the human city ship, New Seoul, looking out at a view that still amazed her every single day. Through the massive windows, she could see dozens of other human city ships floating in space like a collection of miniature worlds, each one bustling with activity and life. The Veltar Empire had found itself in the most unusual position in galactic history. They were the first civilization to surrender to a species that absolutely refused to accept their surrender. Instead of accepting their defeat, the humans had done something completely unexpected. They offered the Veltar jobs. "We appreciate your interest in surrendering," the human customer service representatives had told the confused Veltar admiral. "But we're not currently accepting surrenders. However, we do have several exciting career opportunities available. Are you interested in food service, entertainment, or perhaps our innovative conflict resolution department?" The Veltar, who had built their entire culture around conquest and domination, had no idea how to respond to being offered employment with comprehensive benefits packages. Their military leaders found themselves sitting in job interviews, trying to explain their qualifications for positions in human restaurants and theme parks. "We've never had to write a resume before," one former Veltar general had complained to Mina during her weekly report. "How do you list conquered 17 star systems as relevant work experience for managing a coffee shop?" The humans, being humans, had simply smiled and helped them figure it out. They turned the Veltar's organizational skills and attention to detail into assets for customer service positions. Their natural, intimidating presence became perfect for security work at entertainment venues. Their fleet coordination experience translated surprisingly well to logistics and supply chain management. Most surprisingly, many Veltar discovered they actually enjoyed their new jobs. The steady paychecks, dental coverage, and 2 weeks of paid vacation were more than most of them had ever received during their conquering days. Plus, the humans had a policy of promoting from within. So career advancement was actually possible. Mina's role as liaison between the Terran nomad fleet and the Galactic Council had turned out to be one of the most interesting jobs in the galaxy. Every day brought new reports of human city ships appearing in different sectors, offering assistance to anyone who needed it. The pattern was always the same. Human city ship would arrive in a system experiencing some kind of problem: war, famine, natural disasters, or just general social unrest. The humans would set up temporary shelters, provide food and medical care, and then sit down with all parties involved to figure out long-term solutions. But the most popular feature of any human city ship was always the coffee shops. "It's incredible," Chief Science Officer Woojin Park had told her just last week. "They've opened coffee shops on 700 different worlds now. Each one is slightly different, adapted to local tastes and customs, but they all serve that amazing coffee. And somehow, every barista seems to know exactly what's happening in local politics." The coffee shops had become informal information networks, community meeting spaces, and neutral ground for diplomatic negotiations all at once. Some of the most important peace treaties in recent galactic history had been negotiated over lattes and pastries in human coffee shops. "People feel comfortable talking over coffee," Admiral Choi had explained to Mina. "There's something about sharing a warm drink that makes even enemies willing to listen to each other. Plus, it's hard to stay angry when you're enjoying really good coffee." The Galactic Council had initially been suspicious of the humans' return. 3 centuries of believing they were extinct had not prepared galactic civilization for their sudden reappearance with city ships the size of small planets. There had been emergency sessions, heated debates, concerns about humanity's true intentions. Those concerns had largely evaporated when the humans started helping everyone with their problems without asking for anything in return. It was hard to maintain suspicions about people who kept showing up to natural disasters with food, medical supplies, and temporary housing, then leaving without claiming any territory or demanding payment. Min-AI walked over to Admiral Choi's desk where the mysterious artifact that had started everything sat in a place of honor. It looked so ordinary now that she knew what it really was: an old Earth television remote control that had been modified with quantum communication technology. "We never throw away anything that might be useful later," Admiral Choi had explained, with his characteristic shrug when he first showed her the device's true nature. This old remote was sitting in someone's junk drawer for decades before our engineers figured out how to turn it out into a galaxy-wide communicator. You'd be amazed what you can accomplish with spare parts and a little creativity. The remote had become something of a legend throughout the galaxy. The idea that humanity's grand return had been triggered by a modified television remote appealed to people's sense of humor. It was such a perfectly human solution, taking something old and broken and turning it into something useful and important. As Minna prepared her daily report for the Galactic Council, she reflected on how much everything had changed. The galaxy's most feared empire had been defeated not through superior weapons or military strategy, but through humanity's apparent inability to encounter a problem without trying to fix it, feed everyone involved, and offer them a comfortable place to sit while discussing solutions. The human war giants hadn't conquered anything. They had simply made conquest irrelevant through overwhelming hospitality. Why fight wars when you could have coffee and figure out better solutions together? Minna smiled as she began typing her report. In it, she would describe the latest human interventions: a famine relief operation in the Spiral Arm, a diplomatic mediation between two trading partners, and the opening of 17 new coffee shops in previously underserved sectors. The humans were back, and the galaxy would never be the same. But somehow Mina thought as she sipped her morning coffee, that seemed like a very good thing. The war giants had returned not as conquerors, but as the galaxy's most persistent problem solvers, armed with mobile cities, excellent coffee, and an unshakable belief that every conflict could be resolved if you just sat down together and talked it through over a good meal. And so far, they had been absolutely right.